Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cafe Muse. Thank you, Michael Davis, for the beautiful music and Henry for the slideshow. And thank you to the WordWorks for sponsoring our program. I'm Ellen Cole, and I'm hosting tonight along with Majda Gama. Our tech director for this evening, Henry Crawford, will be working his magic behind the scenes. Our featured poets tonight are Ellen Bass and Babo Kamel. Majda will introduce Babo and I'll introduce Ellen. We encourage you to buy our featured readers' books tonight and to donate to Cafe Muse to support our literary programs. Links for buying their books and for making a donation will be in the chat. Audience members have been muted. This helps prevent feedback problems and ensures uninterrupted programming. Please bear with us if we do have a technical glitch. During the reading, you may use the chat to comment or ask questions that our readers may answer during the Q&A period, moderated by the WordWorks Karen Alanier, if time permits. Our program will last for 1 hour. You won't want to miss our next Cafe Muse reading, which will take place on Monday, March 7th at 7:15 p.m. and will feature poets Melanie McCabe and Cindy Savitt. Before tonight's program begins, Karen Alanier will take a few moments to pay tribute to one of the bright lights of our poetry community, who we lost January 30th, poet Linda Paston.
Thank you, Ellen. Linda Paston died January 30th, 2023 at the age of 90 years old. Brilliant and unassuming, she was a graduate of Radcliffe College and held an MA from Brandeis University. Author of 19 collections of poetry, starting with A Perfect Circle of Sun in 1971, and most recently, Almost an Elegy, new and later selected poems from W.W. Norton in late 2022. All of her friends and colleagues say the same thing about her. She took the craft of poetry and writing seriously, and that is what sustained her. Moreover, she sustained us with short, accessible poems on life and living, on death and grieving, on family, feminism, and even on her beloved dogs. I first heard Linda read in 1968 when I was a student at the University of Maryland. And from that moment on, she was my role model for what a poet could do, how a poet could touch people and make a difference. I'm going to read 2 poems that I find are companions to each other of hers. If I Had to Live My Life Again, published in Poetry in 1998, and Blizzard, published in Poetry magazine in 1978, and later published in her book, Carnival Evening, 1999. If I had to live my life again, I would work only in black and white. I think of Degas' words as the snow continues to fall, blanking out the green earth, bleaching the sky, until only the black shadows of buildings are left and the wet trunks of trees darkened with cold. This is the death of color. Winter is slamming its door on the heart, and soon nothing will remain but beauty, the austere line of charcoal moving across white paper, of boot prints engraved upon new snow. And here's her poem, Blizzard. The snow has forgotten how to stop. It falls at the glass a silk windsock of snow blowing under the porch light, tangling trees which bend like women snarled in their own knitting. Snow drifts up to the step, over the door still, a pointless blur, the wedding of form and motion, shaping itself to the wish of any object it touches. Chairs become laps of snow. The moon could be breaking apart and falling over the eaves, over the roof, a white bear shaking its paw at the window, splitting the hive of winter, snow stinging the air. I pull a comforter of snow up to my chin and tumble to sleep as the whole alphabet of silence falls out of the sky. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was lovely. Linda will be greatly missed. Now, on to this evening's poets. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce Ellen Bass to you. Ellen is one of my poetry heroes, so you'll have to excuse me if I start gushing a little bit about how wonderful she is. Ellen's most recent book, Indigo, was published by Copper Canyon Press in 2020. Her other books include Like a Beggar, The Human Line, and The Mules of Love, which won the Lambda Literary Award. She co-edited the first ever major anthology of women's poetry, No More Masks. Ellen's poems have appeared in The New Yorker, the American Poetry Review, the New York Times Magazine, the Atlantic, and many other distinguished journals and anthologies. Her honors are many. She's been awarded fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the California Arts Council. She's received many awards and prizes for her work, including 4 Pushcart Prizes. Ellen teaches in the MFA writing program at Pacific University, and I've been lucky enough to be her student, although not at Pacifica. Ellen is an extraordinary teacher, generous, warm, and with an uncanny ability to illuminate the puzzles of our craft. She leads a wonderful series of classes, which she calls her Fireside Craft Talks. And I was lucky enough to take those. She's generous, warm, and has an uncanny ability to illuminate the puzzles of our craft. Ellen's poetry holds all of these traits as well. In her poem, Relax, she relates a parable told by Buddha. A woman climbs down a vine to go down a cliff to escape a tiger, but halfway down, she sees a tiger is at the bottom too, and 2 mice are gnawing away on the vine. But she sees a wild strawberry growing in a crevice next to her on the cliff. And Ellen tells us, oh, taste how sweet and tart the red juice is, how the tiny seeds crunch between your teeth. This is at the heart of Ellen's poems. Terror, sorrow, and death are very present, illuminated in a cascade of metaphors and heart-stopping images. There is always the strawberry to be eaten, the beloved partner whose body is a wonderland of pleasure, the goodness of work to be done, the relentless beauties of earth. Grab them, she says, gorge on them, hold them, even your own death. I'm very honored to present to you the poet who celebrates both the strawberry and the tiger, Ellen Bass.
Thank you so much. That is just about the most beautiful introduction. It's a poem in itself. Thank you. I'm really deeply touched, Ellen, and and thank you, also for making this evening be a tribute to Linda Paston as well, one of our brilliant poets, and as was said, so brilliant, so modest. I had the pleasure of meeting her just once, and it was indelible in her very quiet way. She was just a gift to all of us in poetry. So I'm really happy to be with you all and read some poems to you. And this first poem is called "Taking Off the Front of the House." I'm at the kitchen table, drinking strong tea, eating eggs with poppy gold yolks from our chickens, Marilyn and Estelle. There's a red car parked across the street and my neighbor's gorgeous irises, their frilled tongues tasting the air. Monsanto is suing Vermont, I say, turning the pages of the Times. I say it loud because Janet's in the living room, in the faded chair the cat has scratched into hay, eating yogurt and the strawberries she brought home from the field, where she labors to relieve the tinderberry of its heavy chemical load. What, she says, she isn't wearing her hearing aids, so I take a breath and project my voice. And as I enunciate the corporate evils, suddenly the front of the house is sheared away. We're on a stage, the audience seated on the asphalt of Young Love Avenue, watching this quirky couple eat their breakfast and yell back and forth from one room to another. And throughout the day, as I throw a load of laundry in the dryer, answer the phone, as she lies on the couch reading Great Expectations, and we bicker about the knocking in the pipes and whether we really need to call a plumber, I admire how the actor who plays the character of me and the actor who plays the character of her perform our parts so perfectly in this production that will last just a little while before it closes for good. And when night comes, we smoke a little weed, something called thunderfuck, which must be someone's high opinion of himself, but in truth is quite nice, though we only take a couple tokes since Janet's on blood pressure medication and she can't do the way she did at 20 when she slung a goatskin bag over her shoulder and wandered around Senegal in flip-flops. As I reach for her, she says, now the audience can sit on the back deck by the barbecue, and this play can be called The Old Lesbians Go to Bed at the End of the Day. I light the candle her mother gave me for my last birthday when she could still put on her lipstick. The set is authentic, a messy stack of books on my nightstand. On her side, the hearing aids that sit there all day. And as she turns toward me, and I feel again the marvelous architecture of her hips, the moon, that expert in lighting, rises over the roofline, flooding us in her flawless silvery wash. This is a more recent poem that I wrote at the very beginning of the pandemic. During the pandemic, I listened to the July 26th, 1965 Chouin Lapin recording of A Love Supreme. The first familiar know them anywhere notes bless me this savage morning. Coltrane's horn racing up and down every alley, in and out of veins, over the faces of lakes and into the heart of stones. And when he repeats a love supreme again and again, it's as though if he says it enough, he can ease that mercy down into me, into the tiny acicular chain, the chemical rush, the spark, and my brain getting it, if even just for this 32 minutes and 48 seconds. My daughter's been sick 7 weeks with the virus. Yesterday, she felt a little bored, she texted. And I grabbed that like a shopping cart. I loaded up with hope, make it prayer. When the day's portion of the Torah is recited, someone stands by to correct mistakes. The words must vibrate precisely in the air. So I open my door to the breath of his instrument that refuses nothing, lavishing the grass, gutters and trees, concrete, cars, the gopher pulling down the new lettuces, this generous sound that can mean anything, nothing, whatever you need. And isn't that God? Isn't that it? This shivering, this fall to my knees. Gods do walk among us, but humans are, after all, a broken promise. And yet these humans seem to be trying to enter what? I can almost hear it. This old planet. Worms passing earth through their tissue, orchids, corn, mockingbirds throwing themselves into song like there's no tomorrow, which there may not be. Yet still a mountain, still wind, and Coltrane still offering the same 4 notes, like a teacher who is infinitely patient. He's telling me it's worth it to be in a body. He's telling me I'm alive in a beach town in California, and my daughter in a high-rise in Vancouver, my girl lying feverish on the couch she's been lying on 49 days and 49 nights, still alive. This next poem I wrote quite a while back, and the background of it is that my wife and I were concerned about the way that the meat that we ate was raised. And we started to look around to see if we could find chickens that we felt were sustainably raised. And every time we looked a little more deeper into the information, we weren't really very satisfied with what people were saying was sustainable, and how the chickens were treated. And just around then, we had some young friends who were raising chickens for themselves, and they offered to raise some for us if we wanted, and then we could buy them from them. They had just a lot of land, and these chickens were going to have a good life until they were killed. And so we said, great. And about 3 months later, I knew nothing about chickens, and I had no idea how long they lived before they were slaughtered. But about 3 months later, which evidently is the amount of time, we got a call, and we were asked, would you like to help slaughter the chickens? And I said yes, because I did think that I should be willing to kill whatever I was willing to eat. So the experience, as you'll see, it affected me deeply. And this poem was an exploration into what that was all about. It's called, What Did I Love? What did I love about killing the chickens? Let me start with the drive to the farm as darkness was sinking back into the earth, the road damp and shining like the snail's silver ribbon, and the orchard with its bony branches. I loved the yellow rubber aprons and the way Janet knotted my broken strap, and the stainless steel altars we bleached, Brian sharpening the knives, testing the edge on his thumbnail, all 88 Cornish hens huddled in their crates, wrapping my palms around their white wings, lowering them into the tapered urn. Some seemed unwitting as the world narrowed. Some cackled and fluttered, some struggled. I gathered each one, tucked her bright feet, drew her head through the kill cone's sharp collar, her keratin beak and the rumpled red vascular comb that once kept her cool as she pecked in her mansion of grass. I didn't look into those stone eyes. I didn't ask forgiveness. I slid the blade between the feathers and made quick crescent cuts, severing the arteries just under the jaw, blood like liquor pouring out of the bottle. When I see the nub of heart later, it's hard to believe such a small star could flare like that. I lifted each body, bathing it in heated water until the scaly membrane of the shanks sloughed off under my thumb. And after they were tossed in the large plucking drum, I loved the newly naked birds, sundering the heads and feet neatly at the joints, a poor man's riches for golden stock, slitting a fissure, reaching into the chamber, freeing the organs, the spill of intestines, blue-tinged gizzard, the small purses of lungs, the royal hearts, easing the floppy liver carefully from the green gallbladder, its bitter bile, and the fascia unfurling like a transparent fan. When I tug the esophagus down through the neck, I love the suck and release as it lets go, then slicing off the anus with its gray pearl of shit. Over and over, my hands explore each cave, learning to see with my fingertips, like a traveler in a foreign country, entering church after church. In every one, the same figures of the Madonna, Christ on the cross, which I'd always thought was gore, until Marie said to her it was tender, the most tender image. Every saint and political prisoner, every jailed poet and burning monk. But though I have all the time in the world to think thoughts like this, I don't. I'm empty as I rinse each carcass, and this is what I love most. It's like when the refrigerator turns off and you hear the silence. As the sun rose higher, we shed our sweatshirts and moved the coolers into the shade. But other than that, no time passed. I didn't get hungry. I didn't want to stop. I was breathing from some bright reserve. We twisted each pullet into plastic, iced and loaded them in the cars. I loved the truth, even in just this one thing, looking straight at the terrible, one-sided accord we make with the living of this world. At the end, we scoured the tables, hosed the dried blood, the stain blossoming through the water. I had the good fortune to spend a week and then a week again at the Andrews Experimental Forest in Southern Oregon. It's an old growth forest that fortunately, and with great work, the firefighters were able to save from the terrible fire that ran through Southern Oregon a couple of years back. And so it's still in existence. And they do experiments, they're long-term ecological experiments, some of them running 200 years, which is one of the most optimistic things, I think, in the world. And they also have this enlightened idea that scientists and artists should be in conversation with each other. If only more people thought that. And when I was there, I wrote this poem. It's called Fungus on Fallen Alder at Lookout Creek. Florid, fluted, flowery petal, flounce of a girl's dress, ruffled fan, striped in what seems to my simple eye an excess of extravagance, intricately ribboned like a secret code, a colorist's vision of DNA. At the outermost edge, a scallop of ivory, then a tweedy russet, then mouse gray, a crescent of celadon velvet, a streak of sleek seal brown, a dark arc of copper, then butter, then celadon again, again butter, again copper, and on into the center, striped thinner and thinner to the green, green moss furry heart. How can this be necessary? Yet it grows and is making more of itself. Dozens and dozens of tiny starts, stars no bigger than a baby's thumbnail, all of them sucking one young dead tree on a gravel bank that will be washed away in the next flooding winter. But isn't the air here cool and wet and almost unbearably sweet? And I'll end with this poem. It's the title poem from my most recent book, Indigo. As I'm walking on Westcliff Drive, a man runs toward me, pushing one of those jogging strollers with shock absorbers so the baby can keep sleeping, which this baby is. I can just get a glimpse of its almost translucent eyelids. The father is young, a jungle of indigo and carnelian tattooed from knuckle to jaw, leafy vines and blossoms, saints and symbols. Thick wooden plugs pierce his lobes, and his sunglasses testify to the radiance haloed around him. I'm so jealous, as I often am. It's a kind of obsession. I want him to have been my child's father. I want to have married a man who wanted to be in a body, who wanted to live in it so much that he marked it up like a book, underlining, highlighting, writing in the margins, I was here. Not like my dead ex-husband, who was always fighting against the flesh, who sat for hours on his zafu chanting Om, and then went out and broke his hand punching the car. I imagine when this galloping man gets home, he's going to want to have sex with his wife, who slept in late, and then he'll eat barbecued ribs and let the baby teethe on a bone while he drinks a dark beer. I can't stop wishing my daughter had had a father like that. I can't stop wishing I'd had that life. Oh, I know, it's a miracle to have a life, any life at all. It took 8 years for my parents to conceive me. First there was the war, and then just waiting, and my mother's bones so narrow she had to be slit and I airlifted. That anyone is born, each precarious success from sperm and egg to zygote, embryo, infant is a wonder. And here I am alive, almost 70 years, and nothing has killed me. Not the car I totaled running a stop sign, or the spirocheap that screwed into my blood. Not the tree that fell in the forest exactly where I was standing, my best friend shoving me backward so I fell on my ass as it crashed. I'm alive, and I gave birth to a child. So she didn't get a father who'd sling her onto his shoulder, and so much else she didn't get. I've cried most of my life over that. And now there's everything that we can't talk about. We love, but cannot take too much of each other. Yet she is the one who, when I asked her to kill me if I no longer had my mind, we were on our way into Ross shopping for dresses. That's something she likes, and they all look adorable on her. She's the only one who didn't hesitate or refuse or waver or flinch. As we strode across the parking lot, she said, "Okay, but when's the cutoff? That's what I need to know." Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Ellen, thank you so much for joining us at Cafe Muse tonight. Oh wow, people were gushing over these poems in the chat, and as you're well aware, there's your loyal living room craft talk crowd is here. That is yeah, I'm just so happy to see everybody here from that community as well. But I have the honor of introducing. I hope you'll linger with us. Okay, I have the honor of introducing Babo Kamel, who's reading from her latest book, What the Days Wanted, from Broadstone Press. Babo Kamel's poetry is haunting, mythic, both otherworldly and tragically of this world. Her lyric contains such precise, pure imagery that I return to her lines again and again, just to dwell on the words that burrow in. There is no map for this. The geography is too cruel, she says. And if there is no map, then there can only be language, the language Babo uses to create the world of this book. A book that begins with Chagall and includes a section of stunning ekphrastic poems touching on the works of Wyeth and Picasso. These ekphrastic poems flow seamlessly into the book, nesting within a landscape of suffering and assault, both societal and personal, mythically familiar and utterly Babo's own. Her words, quote, begin to bloom in gardens and towns, crawl out from under rocks, ride the subways, unquote. Babo Kamel splits her time between Raleigh and Montreal. Her work has appeared in the Greensboro Review, Painted Bride Quarterly, CV2, Poet Lore, and Best Canadian Poetry 2020, among others. A Best of the Net nominee and a 6-time Pushcart nominee, her chapbook After is published with Finishing Line Press, and her poetry collection, What the Days Wanted, is published with Broadstone Books. You can find her at www.babokae.com. Please welcome Babo Kamel to Cafe Muse.
Wow. Thank you so much, Maja. What a beautiful introduction. And Ellen, it was such a pleasure to listen to your Achingly Honest poems. They're just really something special. I've never heard you read before. That was a real treat. Before I begin, I really would love to extend thanks to Ellen, Maja, Henry, Karen, Luther, and Claire, who helped to make this evening possible. And a special shout out to Susan Oki, who gave me this recommendation. I'll be reading from my new collection entitled What the Days Wanted, published by Broadstone Books. And I'm going to be reading from 4 sections. The book is in 4 sections, so I'll be reading a few poems from each. Basically, this book explores the challenge of trying to seek comfort in what we believe is the truth, and then the inability to reconcile the other versions of reality that sort of hover just below the surface. It moves through myth, fairy tale, ekphrasis, and contemporary tragedy to arrive at a point without resolution, but with hope, I hope. From the first section, which concerns myth and fairy tale, this is the poem. Icarus advises his daughter. Celebrate yourself. Rise above the chorus of gray that keeps you cave hidden and small. Do not hold back the wild thing that lives deep inside. Insist on wings dipped in sunrise, a festival of feathers in turquoise and violet. Sing not like that mechanical bird fashioned to chirp each morning, but large and loud and out of tune from time to time. Fly beyond the sun. You will not be stunned dumb or become undone by wax melt. Free yourself from that design. Delight in wild wind currents and see from that height the monotony below. Cast off the fixed ideas of who you should be. When you are ready, fling earthward a winged doll made in your own image. Resist the myth that a brazen child will drown. Leave a storm of feathers floating on the water. The second poem is Pinocchio's mother tries to explain what happened. I cannot tell you what occasioned this poem. It just came and I went with it. Her dress is a piece of evening sky, orange suns set against a deepening blue. The little wooden puppet, stiff from nightmare, falls into her lap, tells her about the voices, how they make the trees change into something more than trees, that sing to him about the great return to the heartwood, how they will fill him with sap, give him a fallen bird as brother to come home to. She tells him about the forest, how fledglings must learn their wings, just as he must turn away from the loneliness of trees. She tells him not to fear the voices, but to welcome them, so they can hear the beating that wants only to live inside his body, to be patient with those voices, afraid to come too close. They have forgotten the language of wood. The next section is a sequence of poems that retells the Hansel and Gretel myth, but in a different kind of adventure. The sequence is entitled "And in the Other Version." I'll be reading just a few of the voices that occur in this sequence. The first is Crone Mother, and she begins the sequence. Crone Mother, I found them in brambles, lip stained, the color of hunger. They looked wind wild, ready to run, as if they had wandered days from anything called home. I led them through my dear ones, nutsedge and curly docks, wove star flowers and a seashell into girl's hair. Boy walked behind. I learned he never turned his back on anything. Time knitted itself into a net centuries long, and we felt like a family of fish breathing for each other. I taught them enter poems as living things, inhaled deeply, taste the shape of words as sustenance. I did not know how starved I was for touch until girl rubbed oil on my parched skin, combed my white hair with a gentleness like a waft of rain. Boy's back ached from the old hatchet and the hacksaw. He fed the fire and kept us on this earth instead of in a private collection locked behind glass, a first edition of ourselves. They said they fed breadcrumbs to the birds with no plans to re-enter their childhood, that father-spun version of a mother who never looked back. Ghost mother, they called her, forgetting the endless night of wants, the endless nights of want larger than their bodies, breaking them into wail and how long she rocked them. Her voice something only imagined when a strain of song called. The next one I'm going to read from this sequence is in the voice of girl, and it's a ghazal, which depends on repetition. Girl, a young girl exiled from the arms of her mother will never recover the loss of a mother. Our shoes had holes when we reached the border. A man with rough hands said he'd take me to mother. I dreamt that morning would bring us together. The night is a knife without a mother. To wake in a cage, I'll remember forever. A boy said for weeks he had not seen his mother. Our hearts lived in rooms that would never get warmer. We began to forget that we once had a mother. Forced from home, you are always a stranger. When we left, I lost the idea of mother. An orphan child will always be other, locked outside the sweet language of mother. All lost mothers wander somewhere together. The birth of a child, forever a mother. I live in a poem with no answer. Sometimes the moon, I think, is my mother. I spent a lot of time living in Chagall's visions, and I just couldn't stop. I couldn't get away from them. I couldn't tear myself away from the blue. I have a chapbook that focuses more on those paintings, but the next section are ekphrastic poems that respond to different paintings. And I'm going to read one, and then I'll read one after Chagall. The first one, below a sky that holds nothing, after Hopper, House by the Railroad, 1925. 1. Beside the railway track, a house fades into its abandonment. The paint on the outside, once the deep shade of teal, remains only its thin suggestion. Each window blind half shades the weight of emptiness, straining the sills. This was someone's childhood, that long forgotten self that waited for someone to enter. 2. To enter, you must first assume a door left open is the invitation. Honor it as you would a confidence from a new friend who risks a crack in the fence around her silence. Hold it close to your chest as you would a fallen bird. 3. Untell it. No house waits by the railroad. You on a train, houses fall back, before memory, or before the first time you realize that lives exist everywhere you are not. That the woman hanging sheets on the line, now a speck to you, has birthed and lost children. And that after you are gone, she will sort socks and remember a moment in girlhood when the scent of lilacs filled her the way a boy's kiss would, years later, before you were born. And this next one is one of the Chagall obsessions. Visions, after Chagall, I and the village. And when you look into the eye of the horse, its pupil white and transparent, and see the horse dreams there, that the horse is dreaming of a cow who was only a cow without dreams of her own, milk squirting into the bucket, that the girl in the green skirt leans over, careful not to waste a drop, and the girl imagines herself outside of the village, with its lifeblood of gossip and crooked-cap boys, with violets in their hearts, as if these were enough. And the cobbler's son looks into her eyes and sees her girl dreams there, sees them distant and strange, like paintings with perspectives flung sideways. She dreams of a soldier in a ragged jacket whose face inhabits the entire doorway of a church, and of a sky so infinitesimal she could swallow it, so that entire galaxies would swirl in her chest, which holds the red glitter of stars, and a bride forever floating through a whole circus of parading violins, tasting of amber and rain. And she looks into the eye of the painter. And the cobbler's boy, seeing this, stops breathing for a moment. And that sound is so loud, the cow in the horse's dream looks up and steps out of it into something vast and blue. And the girl continues to milk the air. The bucket holds on to its emptiness. The horse can't help what it dreams. And the final section focuses on more contemporary times, and I'll read a few from those. It's an ambush, a fire burst, breeze buzzed and ravenous for something nameless. We could smell it on the skin, a residue of ash and marl. The umber rises from within, forms a permanent dusting. The birds try to warn us each morning, but all we do is thrash the air with our fire-damaged wings. Oh, we could fly once, skirt the lies camouflaged as prayer, but we've grown ground-tied and tired. Listen, we cannot surrender. Everyone looks the same under a Red Sea. Even the little ones, branded before they can walk, their small fists rise on the shoulders of their fathers. Something must change. Our beaches are littered with the moonless gasp of fish. The next one I wrote during the terrible things that were going on at the southern border. The street without drums. Listen, this is true. We walked for days, the desert in our shoes. Our little ones ran out of tears. The sun was a blister in the sky. Before us, others had crossed. At night, we heard the song of bones. Some said it was the wind, but no wind ever sounded like that. It was as if all the dead formed a chorus, and the words split apart midair. We dreamt of what lay ahead. Distance was an enemy that kept growing, longer like that parade of children the piper once led out of town. We knew that story, how the young ones never returned. We could never believe such a terrible thing until we reached the border. Years from now, they will say it didn't happen. This is the second to last poem, and I have the privilege of being a dual citizen, Canada and the US. I spent the first part of my life in Canada, and this poem spans some time. I ended up for a while retiring in Florida. I'm glad to say I'm no longer there right now. Sorry, Floridians, I know some dear friends from Florida are out there. Before I became one, I thought all Americans were blonde. At least they seemed to be, those tanned and smiling kids we met in youth hostels. They all had names like Dan, Wendy, or Mike, solid, healthy names, as if they grew up on corn, milked cows, or surfed in California. That distant place that took me years to reach. And even then it seemed unreal, driving along Highway 1, each moment the kind you could die in, or at least the kind that lifted you out of yourself into someone else's road trip. Windows open, radio blasting, and you singing louder than the waves. In a way, it's a setup. An idea waits for you to enter, and it's a baptism. Doubts washed away, new skin joining the already initiated, and a story you can share so that California is not yours alone. Then everyone nods while you eavesdrop on yourself, not quite believing your own words that sidestep the memory of the man sleeping in San Diego, the pavement his pillow, one black shoe an anchor for the cardboard sign, hungry and homeless, anything helps. In California, I saw my brother everywhere, in the bearded and bedraggled men leaning on carts, arms outstretched, palms side up. Some muttered to themselves or argued with the unseen. Their eyes flicked as quickly as sparrows fleeing a cat. Some called out to me. I turned away. Oh, brother, I have failed you. My life has been good. In Montreal, I visit him in the one-room apartment his life has become. For years, he forbids me to hug him, says that was the rabbi's rule, says his teeth move when he reads, asks me how to cook an egg. He was 18 when the voices started, says God is punishing him for once having loved a man. My brother turned 60. Every birthday card in Publix feels like a lie. Trump wins the election. My brother calls to tell me not to worry, that the rabbi says out of darkness will come light. There is a travel ban. There is no light. A wall looms in the distance. In Florida, houses built by dark-haired men who sing Pegados y Milagros and El Amor from ladders and trucks. They toss heavy tiles, mix cement, dig the hard packed earth for hibiscus to take root. Here, you can retire, choose your narrative, begin to believe it yourself. And the last poem, which is actually the last poem of the book, Ghost Mother, makes an appearance. I unlearned my future when I tripped over trees, bird song at my knees like cricket call. I never knew I was tall in my made-to-order world. Everyone mirror imaged, custom fitted, life droned. We thought that was happiness. Wore smiles picked at birth, ate pre-portioned food, slept exactly 8 hours. Our sun was a cutout, flip-sided by the moon, programmed. We lived outside of metaphor. Things were not other things. Things just were. Libraries became one big how-to, with the last poet lost to exile hundreds of years before. We did not even bleed. But here, in this strange place, they call me the tower, the one who breathes through clouds. They say, I am like a giant fallen bird with melted wings. They say, I must learn to be small again, to build a nest, to come home. Thank you.
Oh, Babo, wow. Thank you for being an American and for mirroring these experiences back at us. That was really hugely just meaningful and beautiful. And that puzzle, I think, was my favorite of tonight's reading. We like to move on to a brief Q&A session, and our fearless leader, Karen Alanier, will lead that. Karen, take it away.
Thank you, Majda. And thank you to both Ellen Bass and to Babo Kamel for exceptionally wonderful readings tonight. I noticed between the two poets a big theme, mother. And I was wondering if you both could talk about the mothering influence on you, possibly, the literary one, but whatever works. And so let's go to Ellen first and see what Ellen has to say about that.
Well, first, that was a beautiful reading, Baba. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Gosh, that's a very big topic. Well, I had a mother. I had a mother, and I was very fortunate in the mother that I got, as well as a grandmother. I think my grandmother. Was she? Can you see her up there at the top? Yeah, that's her. Yeah, very strong maternal lineage, and that gave me a lot. I don't know how I messed up so many things in my life, given how much support I got, but it just goes to show that my mother believed everything always got better, but it really doesn't. It really is more complicated than that, as we've seen in the world too, isn't it? Oh my God. Literarily, my literary mother was Florence Howe, with whom I co-edited No More Masks, that came out back in 1973, and who co-founded the Feminist Press. That's the longest running women's press in the world. I guess it's about 52 or 53 years now. And she was my teacher in college, and I'm so grateful to her for all that she showed me about how to have a life in poetry. I don't know, I could go on. And of course, I'm a mother, and you heard a little bit about that. And now I'm a grandmother.
I love the fact that you were airlifted from your mother. I mean, that was quite a quite an image. Well, okay, thank you very much, Ellen. Babo, what can you tell us about the mothering behind your literature?
Well, like Ellen, I've had a mother, and it was a difficult time for me because my mother died just a few months after I gave birth to my first son, and I felt the loss, and I felt the loss throughout, at different stages of my son's life where I couldn't share those experiences with her. I too was fortunate to have a good mother. But the thing I think that really got to me was what was going on at the border, and children separated from their mothers. I couldn't, it was impossible to take in. So I think a lot of that stems from there. And I think I've had a lot of literary mothers in my life. I don't know if I'd want to mention them in particular right now because there are too many. And some of them I think were even men. I don't think that mothering has to be attached only to women. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Well, thank you very much. I think both gave really interesting answers that we can all take away and think about. Back to you, Majda.
Well, I wish the evening could go on and on, but I will wrap it up. Thank you, Karen, for the Q&A. I always love to hear what you're going to throw at the guests, not to stump them, but just to add to the beautiful conversation we've had tonight. I loved the pairing, Ellen Bass, Babo. Thank you. You two braided together beautifully. We do take great care in pairing people up. So I'm really glad that both of you, your words resonated with each other. Thank you, Henry, for your tech wizardry. Thank you to my co-hosts, Ellen Cole, who is just a beautiful poet herself, Renee Garrity, who isn't with us tonight, Luther Jett, Claire McGough. Most importantly, thank you to the audience for being here. If you want to watch tonight's program again, I know I will. It will be up on Cafe Muse's YouTube channel tomorrow morning, most likely, Henry, right? Please consider purchasing the poets' books, going to their websites, finding what they're doing in the literary world. So many of us here are really enriched by Ellen Bass's craft talks. I'll just gush about them. But we are here because you support us. If you have any ability at all to donate to WordWorks, thank you. We can continue to do this and pay our wonderful poets. Please join us Monday, March 6th at 7:15, Cafe Muse, presenting Melanie McCabe and Cindy Sabat. Now have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again next month. Thanks. Take care.